Moving on to the last topic of the day, comes to us from gamesindustry.biz. So Ubisoft responds to people's reactions to Far Cry 5. From what I've seen, the reactions to I guess I'm thinking of Wolfenstein.
Yeah.
I saw the negative reactions to Wolfenstein. I was like, get over yourselves, idiots.
Yeah, that was the Nazi thing.
It was the Nazi thing. Like, oh, you should, like, no, like, Nazis are bad.
Right.
And they should be discriminated against. Sorry.
Anyways.
Moving on.
Far Cry 5.
The announcement of Far Cry 5 received a different sort of attention that it might have done in another year. Arguably, this is not an attribute of anything Ubisoft or Montreal studio did, but rather the world outside the games industry. So this is a case of the world matching the game. In just a weird way. The pitch is simple enough. Explore the open world in fictional Hope County, Montana, as you take on a religious extremist cult. It's a less exotic setting than past Far Cry outings, but the formula seems to be fairly firmly in place. Naturally, long development cycles mean work on Far Cry 5 began long before the recent discourse in American culture, but is another example of how outlandish video game narratives are becoming all too real. Bethesda faced similar criticisms with the launch of this year's Wolfenstein 2, with exec Pete Hines telling us it's disturbing that Wolfenstein can be considered a controversial political statement.
Yeah, I remember seeing a video where like they asked him about how it portrayed Nazis. He's like, yeah, they're effing Nazis. It's like this is just how it is. Like it's just mind blowing that some people can argue that.
Man,
just how the world
makes me
is
so
these
angry
days.
that we're worried about the feelings of Nazis. Ask your local Jew how they feel about Nazis. All right. So, quote from Dan Hay, the creative director on Far Cry 5, says, "We made Far Cry 4, then Primal, and there was a moment about 3.5 years ago where we had the opportunity to talk about where we'd take Far Cry 5. We brought back the idea of bringing it to the States. We thought it might be the right time." So, this is my favorite part of this whole article. Shortly after a Change.org petition, the second week in a row we've had Change.org on the show,
Right.
called for Ubisoft to cancel the game, decrying the use of Christians and mainly Caucasians as the enemies, as well as the American setting, While there are questions as to the validity of this position, it's no stretch of the imagination that certain corners of the U.S. may react in such a way. In those corners of the U.S. can feel free not to play the game.
Yeah, I mean, I get it, but you got to think about games as, I want to say, like an extension of art. Like it's an art form, right? And it's a commentary, whether or not it's intentional on today's society. I mean, we're talking like this game's had 4 or 5 years of development. Like this was not a topic that would have been at all controversial or confusing or anyway.
Happened
4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah, started
this is
a long
how
time
it is.
ago.
This is just a thing that happens, and it's a bad timing, and that kind of sucks because it looks like a fun game. But I think it's important that as an art form, we're able to talk about issues like this and discuss issues like this. And the sad part is there's probably a place sort of like this somewhere in the States that nobody knows about.
Yeah.
Right? There's probably places like this.
Those people don't use the internet.
Maybe not this extreme. Maybe
Probably
there's not people running around toting guns and courting off martial law, but there's cults out there. Like we've seen them before. We've seen it with even Charles Manson, who just passed away a couple weeks ago. That was a really big deal because, I mean, that stuff was awful. And so, like, are we not allowed to have that as an art form just because it uses symbols that people associate with good? So I think it's tough because the critics are the ones, they're watching like a 2-minute trailer or 5 minutes of gameplay and they're jumping to conclusions about what it is.
Yeah.
I think the idea of them using like Christian symbols is, I think people are making the wrong conclusion. I think they're saying that all Christians are like this game, and Ubisoft is saying these are what we think Christians are.
Yeah.
It's like, no, this is what people are. Like there are people that are like this, and they misuse these
Extremism.
things. Extremism. It's there in every facet, whether you're an atheist or a communist or a socialist or a Christian, whatever. There's always stuff like that. So I think it's kind of unfair to be like, this is a video game. Play it or don't play it. If you don't like it, don't play it.
I think
that's it.
The problem lies when people outside the gaming industry, when news outlets outside the gaming industry get a hold of something like this.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, oh, this game is telling you that all white Christians are extremists and want to kill everyone. And that's the kind of news that reaches people like our parents, who then ask us, you're not buying this game, are you?
Right.
And we have to explain to them, all right, that's not how it actually is.
Yeah.
That's not they're basing that off this little bit of information, and they're not going to do further research. That doesn't get clicks, which doesn't make them money. So why would you dig deeper on it?
Well,
like,
it's like
we can tell you.
Well, it's like the shootings in Las Vegas where the bump stock came into play, and then I don't remember if it was CNN or what channel it was, tried to show a bump stock on air and like how easy it was to buy it. And then it comes out that it wasn't actually a bump stock at all, and they had no idea what they were talking about. It's just like stuff like that. Like that's all just. Those are the kind of things that you're trusting for your news and media. So when it comes to stuff like this, they're looking at a couple images that have a cross in them or people meeting in a church. You're like, oh, clearly this is saying Christians kill people.
Yeah.
Like it's not racist, but it's no different than saying,
prejudice.
Yeah, it's prejudice. It's no different than saying that all Muslims are terrorists. Like that's not what
it's not how it works.
And also it's a video game.
Yeah. That point even like stressed. In the article, Dan Hay says that. Let's keep in mind it's a video game. We'll run across the quote here in a minute, but he stresses that the team, like every team ever, tries to keep the game in a fictional world as possible. There is no Hope County, Montana.
Right.
It doesn't exist. Montana exists. Hope County does not. Just quote for this one. I really wanted a villain that stood for something, that they believed that they were right, and almost believed that what they were doing was for the greater good. There was a layer of complexity that we wanted for the father, who is kind of the main villain in this game.
It's unfortunate to call him the father.
Call him the father. I know it adds to the level, but
Christianity stuff.
there was I feel like the villain was called that in Outlast 2, wasn't he?
I think
the
so.
father.
Yeah.
They referenced him as the father or father or something. Father something.
I mean, people protested that game, but it was for a lot of different reasons.
Yeah, that game had its own problems.
That was its own thing.
Again, I'm happy not to play the game again.
Yeah, I mean, he goes on and he talks about, the thing is when people discover a theme like this, they come to you and say, well, your game has to be about this. A couple weeks later, the world will change and they'll go, no, your game needs to be about this. It's an interesting thing to work on a game that people are so passionate about and that has story elements that feel very now. But the truth of the matter is we have to remember it's a game. We're building an environment where players are going to express themselves. I get the outrage for this as opposed to Wolfenstein, just because this is a scenario you could actually see happening in 5 years, in 10 years. It could be happening right now in some podunk place in Idaho, for all we know. Like this could be a real problem that's happening. Wolfenstein, obviously not. Nazis lost. They're not taking over the world. That's never going to happen. That's not a real thing. So I think people may hit close to home. I think a lot of times in the mainstream culture, Christians are kind of persecuted in general for being intolerant and stuff like that. And so I think a lot of times people are more sensitive to that. And then when you see something like this, oh, that's just another thing against Christians. It's like, well, that's
not really.
They're not really trying to make a political point here. It's a video game. This is a fun topic. It was fun 5 years ago anyway.
It's just a game.
Yeah.
The guys in Ubisoft Montreal are not the ones thinking about America's problems.
Yeah, very true.
Bear that in mind. This is a studio outside of the States. Granted, in a country that butts up against the States.
I'm sure they know quite a bit about it.
I'm sure they know enough about it. But when ask a Canadian, what's popular American news on their mind, it's is part of the response you're going to get.
Now, if there was a game where Trump was an evil villain and you were having to chase him down in the White House, then I could maybe see that's probably a conflict of interest.
I can promise you that exists as a Flash game somewhere.
Yeah, but I mean a real Ubisoft comes out, it's like Far Cry.
Far Cry Trump.
Far Cry. Oh, no, it's Far Cry Agent Orange. There you go. That's what they call it. Maybe that would be something okay, I'm going to raise my hand. That might be a little too far.
Oh my goodness.
So it's just, this is how it is.
Yeah. This last quote I kind of want to hit there is we've reached the point where it's not just go out and blow stuff up. It's not just go out and rampage somewhere. There are opportunities to meet characters, have relationships, be in a world that feels real and put you in a moment where you're introspective and think about it. And then step out and have a completely different experience with a completely different tone. It's a cool time to be living. At the end of the day, kind of past all this weird controversy in games, we have really cool games coming out.
Yeah.
Wolfenstein 2 was great. I'm excited for Far Cry 5.
Oh,
I loved Far Cry 4.
Oh, yeah.
And I like the gameplay of Ubisoft. And
I think it's good that they're finally getting away from the exotic locations. I think it'll be cool to have something a little bit closer to home. When he talks about the not just go out and blow stuff up, what's the theme of the last few Far Cry games compared to what they're talking? Is it always been relationship building, or is this kind of a new focus that they're doing? Because I didn't play Far Cry.
Well, you build relationships. Well, yeah, it kind of is that way. In Far Cry 4, you basically on the side that you're on, there's two people
Mhm.
that are kind of like they're both leaders, and so in the missions that come up, you can choose to pick this person's plan or this person's plan, and you can go back and forth and like build one to like be the leader of the whole
Mhm.
crew by the end of the game.
Gotcha.
Which I don't know if it's decided by the decisions you've made or by the decision in the last mission, but I mean, I imagine like based on the look of the trailers we've seen,
Yeah.
this looks pretty much like just take Far Cry 4 and move it to the next Far Cry.
Yeah.
Just like Primal was take Far
Just
Cry
so-
4 and put it in Stone
I was
Ages.
gonna say Far Cry 4 and Far Cry Primal were a little bit controversial because the map, like if you
It was the
overlaid
same.
them, it was the same, and some of the same assets. It was just in a different time. So I'm hoping that it will be. I don't want to say rejuvenate because the franchise still did really well,
Yeah.
but I hope it's. I hope it's different. Not that the other stuff was bad or that I even played it, but we don't just need Far Cry in forest or Far Cry in the jungle or Far Cry in the water. Like we need a new game that happens to be Far Cry. And I think from the stuff I've seen versus the stuff we saw before, I think this is a much the thing that I've kind of noticed with Far Cry, at least in their media and some of the stuff I've watched, is it seems kind of there's always there's different focus points everywhere. Right? There's different things to focus on. There's different things to do. This seems like a very centralized, like here's this one thing, go and take it down. Like it seems like a little bit more focused story than they maybe have had in the past. I don't know what kind of story you could have had with Primal. It was just fighting a bunch of Sabertooths, right? Isn't that basically what it
Yeah,
was?
I think I don't remember. I played a little bit of the beginning of it, and it was
Didn't really.
tribes. I don't know.
Yeah,
don't remember.
Really on it.
But that is going to wrap it up for the show this week, guys.
Mhm.
Thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing and liking and talking to us and tweeting at us, and it's awesome. We love it. We love you guys. Remember, tweet at us at IR Games. We're on the Twitters all the time. We read all your comments. He reads all your tweets.
Also, we have a debate. We have to settle it. We'll maybe talk about it on Twitter. But pizza, where does it come from? Was it invented by the Italians? Was it invented by the Chinese and then later ripped off by the Italians? I don't know. Somebody brought that up on Twitter after I posted a really weird picture of a bunch of pizza in a frozen food section labeled Asian.
That.
So I'm curious.
I had that thought when you put the pictures. Like, is it actually technically Asian food?
I don't know. So let us know in the comments
traditionally?
below. Hit us up on Twitter what your thoughts are. Probably pull a poll out in a few days.
Something like that.
See what you guys think. I'm kind of curious. I was going to research it and just totally dropped the ball. So it's such is life. It was a weird day today.
Proud of you.
So, all right, guys, that's going to do it for today. Thanks for hanging out.
Bye.
Bye.
Guys, thanks for watching. If you want to see more, click down here somewhere ish here for a playlist of videos. And if you want to subscribe to the channel, click on James's nose. Boop. Boop.